Joel and I, we all have the same spiritual father. You've heard me talk about this, many of you, Papa Jack Taylor. Amen. Joel and I are his two latest sons in the fold. Amen.
The babies.
Yeah, but you were the last. At least you're the babiest of the babies. Amen. But anyway, Joel is, how long have you been practicing law?
Since 1993.
93. So he's been an attorney in my home state of Georgia for quite a while. Amen. Do you actually work in Atlanta or?
No, I work in Rome.
You just work in Rome? Well, you can tell us all about it. Praise God. Okay. Hey, do you want this pure water?
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, brother. Well, it's good to be with y'all. Yeah, I'm going to need that.
See if I can get up. That just means you feel right in here.
Okay. Well, at least I had the top on it, right?
Yeah.
I am a lawyer, and it's weird. I went to law school to get a cousin of my wife's off my back. I was a middle school teacher. I had to either go back and get some more education to keep my teaching certificate up to date, or this girl kept saying, you ought to become a lawyer, you'd be a good lawyer. And I just never wanted to be a lawyer, didn't like lawyers, still don't like lawyers. I know a lot of lawyers, I still don't like them. And I prayed about it. And I felt like the Lord told me to go. So I went to my family and told them what I thought the Lord was telling me to do, and they all thought I was nuts. Went to my pastors and told them what I was going to do, and they told me I wasn't hearing God. I mean, point blank, this is not God. And I made a commitment to him, and I said, here's what I'm going to do, because I believe this is God. I'm not going to wake up at 40 or 50 years old and realize I missed God. So I'm going to go, and if I realize after I get there that this was not God and this was just me, then I'll come and apologize publicly to the church. Fair enough? Well, they still didn't like it, but I decided to go. And while I was there in the first year, I was going on a part-time program. Georgia State University in Atlanta had a part-time program which allowed you to work in the day and go to school at night. Typically, when you go to law school, the bar won't let you work because they want you concentrating on your studies. And so I was not working, but I was reading one day in October, late in the semester. I was reading through Charisma magazine, and I read an article, an interview with a lawyer who had just argued a big case at the Supreme Court of the United States. And this was about his earlier case at the Supreme Court of the United States called Jews for Jesus versus Airport Board of Commissioners. And it was over, at this time you could go all the way back to the gate in the airports. And so it was really about whether or not you could hand out Christian literature in an airport or whether they could close it down. And the Supreme Court held that they couldn't close it down, that they had to allow the speech. And I read that and I thought, this is why I went to law school, right here. So I wrote the man a letter, and I just basically offered to volunteer for him. And I had the letter in an envelope, and I was about to mail it, and I thought, you know what, this is stupid. This lawyer was interviewed in Charisma magazine. He wouldn't be interested in talking to a little old guy like me from Rome, Georgia. And I almost threw it away, and I thought, you know what, it's going to cost me a stamp. I'll let him throw the letter away. Let somebody in his office throw the letter away. So I mailed the letter, and about 2 weeks later, came home from law school and hit the button on my answering machine. You kids don't know what that is, but it was a little box that had a tape player in there. It would record it, and you could listen to them back and forth, and you could save them if you wanted to. It was literally on a tape, like a cassette tape. You don't know what that is either, but trust me, they did exist, okay? And so I listened, and it says, hey, Joel, this is Jay Sekulow. It was Jay Sekulow I wrote the letter to. Hey, Joel, it's Jay Sekulow. I got your letter, and I'd like to talk to you. So we set up and went down and interviewed with him and ended up working with him for 15 years. All because I was so sick of reading law books. If you're thinking about going to law school, the one thing I would tell you is the hardest part of law school is You have to read about 200 pages a day for every class you have. And it's the most boring, laborious reading you've ever done in your life, because it's lawyers and judges writing opinions and telling you what the law means, and half the time you don't understand the words because they keep throwing Latin in, and it just the whole thing is designed to drive you nuts. And so I literally had taken the day off and thought, I'm going to just catch up on my magazine subscriptions. I had 2 or 3 Christian magazines I got at the time. And so I was reading them, and just in that moment, how God crystallized it. Now, here's the irony of it. I told you I worked with Jay for 15 years. Had I gone to law school and graduated from law school and tried to get a job with Jay, he would not have even accepted my resume. He wouldn't have considered me. In fact, I became the guy that you had to talk to get hired to work with Jay. And my resume wouldn't have gotten past me. But because of God's perfect timing, it worked out. And so I've always had a heart for missions. In fact, my wife almost didn't marry me because she thought I was going to be a missionary, and she wasn't interested in being married to a missionary. And I know a lot of missionaries, and I think that was probably wise on her part. But I was just convinced I was going to be a missionary. And so, but somehow she decided that she would persevere, and she ended up marrying me, and I ended up going to law school and working with Jay. But all that time I was there, I know what my calling is. I always have. It's my calling is not America. I'm not an evangelist. I spent 9 weeks on the streets of Munich, Germany, sharing the gospel every day, 6 days a week for 9 weeks, and had not a single convert. That's how good an evangelist I am. I've got a cousin that's an evangelist. He could walk in the room and get half of y'all saved, and most of you are already saved. And he can have you praying a prayer of commitment and getting you all in. I could talk to you for the next 10 hours and may not ever get you to ever say the word Jesus. I'm just not good at that. But I have a heart for the world. I always have. And I can't explain it. It doesn't make any sense. One of my grandfathers was a carpenter. The other grandfather was a farmer. I don't come from impressive people. I was born in Rome, Georgia. Anybody here know where Rome, Georgia is? Okay. Then you know better than everybody how miraculous this is. I mean, this is a little podunk town in the middle of nowhere in North Georgia, halfway between Atlanta and Chattanooga. Nothing good comes from Rome. We're kind of the Nazareth of Georgia. And so, you know, there was something inside me that knew that God expected more from me. And, you know, I'm a lawyer. I was laughing with James. My wife and daughter really are in Orlando spending money. And I do most of my work pro bono. My wife keeps reminding me that I can actually charge people for what I do. And I just have a hard time doing that. It's like somebody calls and says, hey, I need some help. And I'm like, okay, what do you need? And they tell me, and I tell them, and she goes, would you charge them? I go, no, it wasn't that big a deal. You know, they just needed some encouragement on this or needed some encouragement on that. And but I'm in ministry now. And I don't do a lot of private practice. I do some work in juvenile court in Rome still for the next probably 3 or 4 months. But all of my time is taken up doing ministry work. And part of that is God has called me to give that back into the ministry. And rather than, you know, I could be out arguing over who gets the refrigerator and who has to take the kids and who gets which house and who gets the boat and all those things, and charging people through the nose for it, you know, an arm and a leg. But it's just not what God's called me to do. And as I was praying, I went to Louisiana before I became the youngest son of Jack Taylor, but was in the process and dealing with the brothers. I went to the conference that James came and got sick at, and we sent him to the hospital now so that he wouldn't be sick anymore. I went to that to talk to them about some work I'm doing. And when I got down there to speak, right before I went on, a couple of the brothers came to me and said, we know you've done some work in human trafficking, against human trafficking. I always have to say that carefully. I tell people I work in human trafficking. They go, well, that must be profitable. And I say, hey, somebody's got to make the money, right? It takes a lawyer to go, yeah, okay, I can make money at that. I mean, it's doing the same thing to people you were doing before. You're taking advantage of them for money. So they asked me to speak on it. In the middle of an hour and 15-minute presentation, I'd planned to give on something else. And I said, well, okay, I'll be glad to talk about it. So in the middle of my presentation, I had a PowerPoint. I mean, I had a beautiful PowerPoint presentation, everything I was going through. And I just stopped and said, hey, they want me to talk about human trafficking, so I will. And I talked about it for about 15 minutes and went back to the rest of my presentation. And the rest of my presentation was interesting stuff. It's about what's going on in the transgender world in America and how our public schools are using the school system to change our kids and destroy our culture. Now, before you get mad at me, both of my parents are retired public school teachers. I'm a son of a public school teacher. My sister's a retired public school teacher. My wife was a Catholic school teacher. So I have a lot of respect for teachers, but our public schools are being used to socially engineer our culture.
Amen.
And they're getting blatant about it now. You know, in Florida, you can change your gender on your driver's license. You can't change it anywhere else, but you can change it on your driver's license. You can go through surgery, you can go through cross-sex hormone therapy and everything, and you're still going to be either a boy or a girl. You know, it's amazing. We have, 182 genders now? But if you want to change genders, you can only become a boy or a girl. Why are we discriminating against the other 180 genders? Why don't we let people turn into those? And I don't even care about the issue of whether someone thinks they're a boy or a girl. I get it. I get a lot of this is cultural. A lot of it is kind of, we're Americans, we're Puritans. Europeans think we're crazy because we're so rigid in what we believe, especially about sexuality and all those things. And so I get it. I don't care about those issues, but I care when you start manipulating our children. And I care when you start harming parents and telling parents. We had a client in Oregon whose 14-year-old daughter decided she was a boy and that she should be allowed to use the boys' locker room. They had PE every day and were required to change from their street clothes into their gym clothes in the locker room before PE and change back into their street clothes after PE. They couldn't wear them to school. They had to change in a locker room. And she declared that she should be allowed to use the boys' locker room, and the school agreed with her. Mom came to school and said, I don't agree with this. She has a lot of emotional issues, some of it caused because she was abused by her father as a young child. And she needs psychiatric help, which we're trying to get for her. And she shouldn't be allowed in the boys' locker room changing clothes. And the school said to her, when you deliver your children to the school, when they cross over the threshold of the front door of this public school, they no longer belong to you, they belong to us.
That's not a lie.
That's what schools believe.
That's the truth.
Now, there are a lot of good Christian people in the schools, so when I talk about these, I tend to talk in very, very broad generalities, and please understand me. I know a lot of really good Christians in schools, and I know a lot of people that we used to refer to at the ACLJ as Christian buds. Because we would deal with the vice principal who would say, look, I'm a Christian, but we have the Constitution. The Constitution has separation of church and state. You can't do these things. And so the idea that because I chose to use a public school, my child now belongs to the state makes me mad. And the idea that parents don't have any authority over their children in that instance makes me even madder. And so when you start looking at things like that are going on, part of my analytical mind goes, how did we get here? Listen, 3 generations ago, everybody in this country was in church on a Sunday morning. Now it's less than 20%. Of course, you guys aren't in church on Sunday morning either. What am I talking about? Y'all are part of that under 20%. Sorry, I went to church for years. I was a pastor in a church for years that met on Sunday nights. The idea that America could fall this far, this fast, scares me. It terrifies me. And having said all that, I'm not called to America. It's just not my calling. God has put He's put something in my heart that we're going to talk about tonight that goes much deeper than that. But I want to talk about how we got here for a little bit, and then I want to talk about human trafficking, sex trafficking in particular. I realize that there are younger people here, and I won't go too far, I promise you. If I do, hold your hand up and say, stop it or something, okay?
Oh, no, you're completely fine.
I'm a lawyer. I'm used to being interrupted when I talk.
Oh, you're fine.
Usually by a judge.
Just as Karen, I watch illegal human trafficking happen all the time, so go.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I work against...
Advocacy against...
We have a family in Arizona that CPS took their daughter. She had tried to commit suicide by taking Zoloft.
They probably mandated her to take the medication.
Yeah, no, it was medication she was prescribed. She took 7 of them, which wasn't a serious suicide attempt. It wouldn't have killed her. But they told her
Was she in their care?
Well, she lived with her parents at the time. They took her to the emergency room, like good parents do. CPS gets called and comes and says she tried to commit suicide. We need to give her some help. We're going to get her some help. Oh, she also thinks she's a boy, and y'all won't affirm her. And now for 8 months, the parents have not seen their daughter.
In the best interest of the child.
Oh, no, it's always in the best interest of the child.
Of course.
The state knows what the best interest of the child is.
And if the child doesn't take the medication, they are sent to a psychiatric ward and the medication is forced.
Yeah, because we know that this medicine works really well with minors because it has warnings not to take if you're under 18. Yeah.
It's best for them.
Oh, yeah, it's always best for the child. You'd be surprised what's best for the child. You know, and what you wouldn't be shocked at is the worst meth head in the world, that their child still considers them their parent. And the state's going, well, we got to keep them away. And you're going, but this child still feels like that's his dad. And he doesn't care how bad his dad is. That's his dad. And we're going about it all wrong. And the whole thing is screwy. But we're fighting that case in Arizona right now with good Christian people. And the state is interjecting. So how did we get here? How did we become worse than Europe? Or equal to Europe? Europe has been generations ahead of us for decades, probably centuries in the moral decline. How did we get here? And so I want to talk to you about that because it's actually pretty simple. When you look at modern American culture and you go back into the early part of the last century, where you had the beginning of the teachings of Charles Darwin, which came out of the century before that. It came out of the 19th century in the late 1800s. Darwin came along and started going, this just doesn't make sense. I've got a better answer than how God did this, so let me give you my answer. And I've sat on this abandoned island down here in the Galapagos and watched some tortoises, so I really understand God. And I understand how he did it because it's obvious to me. And if you look at that teaching alone, the beginning of evolution. So I'm going to say some things that are probably considered blasphemous tonight. Please don't hang me out to dry. Don't stone me. If you've got tar and feathers, I ask you to step outside now. I'd rather not meet them. But I'm doing it to let you understand the point. I don't care if you believe in evolution. It's fine. If God wanted to take billions of years to make the earth, I'm fine with that. I don't care how he did it. But I know that we're not here by chance. And I know that this planet didn't just evolve by chance. And I know that the universe didn't just come up by chance. To believe in evolution, you have to be more faith-filled than any Christian I've ever met, because it takes faith along the way for a billion things to happen in the best interest of everything. The opposite of the laws of thermodynamics. The very science that they're supposed to believe tells them what they believe can't have happened without some intelligent being intervening. Now, whether God did it in 6 days and rested on the seventh, or did it in 6 billion years and rested on the 7th billionth year, I don't care. That's not a part of my foundation of my faith. Now, to let you see behind the curtain, I personally believe he did it in 6 days. I believe he did it about 10,000 years ago. Maybe 8. But I don't care. But if I can convince you that we can be here without God, you become not as amazing as you used to be. Because you weren't created by God. You weren't made in the image of God. You weren't made by God that loves you and who believes that you're the most special thing on the planet of the earth, in the whole universe. That's a pretty important concept. I can't get to where I'm trying to get to as a culture that's being destroyed if I don't convince you that you're here by chance. I mean, imagine how hopeless is that? You live 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then poof, you're gone. Nothing mattered. Nothing was important. It was all vanity, and now you're gone. That's the most depressing thing I can think of. So you have that starting in the early 19th century. At the same time that's starting and starting to gain steam, you also have the study of eugenics, which is the whole manipulation of humanity. It's basically the doctrine that Hitler used to show that the Jews weren't people, that handicapped people weren't important, shouldn't be allowed to live. Now imagine that. I mean, listen, you don't have to imagine. We live in this world. Well, we need abortion because a lot of ladies are pregnant and have Down syndrome children. And they're just not productive members of society. It's going to destroy their life, and we're better off if we don't. If we get rid of these children, the whole culture would be better off. It's in the best interest of the child. It's better for this child. It's better for this mom. It's better for the dad. Although the dad no longer matters. He's done his part. We're done with him. It's this between a mom and a doctor. That's way down the road from the beginning of eugenics. Eugenics, the study of eugenics was made popular in America by Margaret Sanger. You've heard that name? She founded the organization that changed its name to Planned Parenthood. And the purpose of Margaret Sanger's eugenics was to get rid of lesser people.
Primarily.
Black people. Handicapped people.
Social demographics.
Poor people. Yes. It was social engineering.
Right.
And here we are. Now we've got this idea that people aren't special. Now we've got an idea that says we can create special people, but we have to get rid of the non-special people to do it because, in God's world, you don't have to get rid of non-special people to do it. Those are the ones God's looking for.
Amen.
He's looking for the stupid amongst us. People dumb enough to go to law school. He's looking for us to say, oh, you're special. What talents do you have? None? Good. I can use that. Yeah. Finally, somebody I can work with here. Yeah, I don't have to erase your mind. I can put in it what it needs to have. I don't have to erase your heart. I can leave in it what I put in it already. And so you've got the eugenics coming along, with the abortion coming along, with the science coming along that says God is dead. All of that building up through the 30s and the 40s, watching the World War and the whole world just go. I mean, you want to talk about, I heard the other day, I'm sorry, I'm going to chase a rabbit. I hope you got a lot of time. We're gonna bring the food in here eventually, and y'all go eat while I talk, okay? Because I'm not leaving for a while. I drove a long way to get here with Ron Culver. Okay, I got something coming. So you look at all that, And I heard the other day people talking, oh, this is the worst thing anybody's ever been through. This pandemic and the shape of the world and the election, this is the hardest thing. And I just wanted to slap them. I want to go, we've got a disease so bad that only 99.8% of the people who get it survive. In fact, it's such a bad disease, you have to get tested to find out you've got it most of the time. I mean, while the Chinese were manufacturing this, they should have made something that wouldn't evolve, because the original version of the coronavirus was nasty. And that version is still out here, and people are still getting it. And I'm not trying to belittle this. I take it seriously. I was at Disney World yesterday, and I wore a mask for 9 hours. So I'm a little bit oxygen deprived, and I'll probably say some strange things. But I don't mind wearing a mask. I'm not an anti-masker. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not an anti-anything. I'm an anti-not thinking. And I'm an anti-not going to be manipulated person.
Amen.
But I don't have a problem wearing a mask. It doesn't affect my faith at all. It's kind of like evolution. You want to believe it took 1 billion years? Fine. As long as God had something to do with it, I'm all in. It makes my children feel better for me to wear a mask. I have diabetes. I'm on an insulin pump. I had open heart surgery 4 years ago. I'm overweight. I'm in some pretty serious groups for this virus. I get this virus, I may not last. My kids are worried about that. I appreciate that. And I'm willing to make some sacrifices and do some things that I wouldn't normally do to make my children feel better. All the while trying to explain to them what I really believe about this. But let me tell you something. Being locked down for a couple of weeks in Florida, thank God for Governor DeSantis. Yes. Thank God for parts of Governor Kemp up in Georgia. There are parts of him I like, and parts of him I'm willing to support anybody who wants to run against him. If there's anybody here who wants to move your residency to Georgia and put your name in the hat, I'll support you. But thank God for some sanity that we weren't locked down. But even in California, where you're locked down, this is the worst thing that ever happens to you. You've got a pretty pitiful view of what the world is like. On the worst day we've had this year as a country, 90% of the rest of the world would have killed themselves to swap with us. In 1944, on June the 6th, there were about 10,000, 20,000 men that would have swapped to come live in this moment. It's all a matter of perspective. When Black Lives Matter and Antifa are out burning down Portland and people are panicking, I kept saying, look, y'all don't remember the 60s? We had Bill Ayers blowing up government buildings. We had the Students for Democratic Society and Tom Hayden, Jane Fonda's first husband, blowing up buildings in California. We had people running around with machine guns on the street shooting people. We had bomb threats all over the country. My cousin told me at one point in the 70s there were so many bomb threats going on that if they didn't work to keep them out of the national media, we'd be convinced there was a revolution to overthrow this country going on. And yet, I can't get out of the house. I ran out of toilet paper. Now, I understand that's not a good place to be. But if this is the worst thing that happened to you, you need to get out and live a little bit. I've been in the shanty towns in Namibia, Africa. No electricity, no running water, no houses. They live in tin and aluminum structures with a door that's made out of the same thing. When the door's shut, it's pitch black inside with a dirt floor. When you drive through this neighborhood, guess what the kids are doing? They're out in the yard playing soccer with a ball made out of wadded up t-shirts, laughing. They got it worse than all of us, and they're still laughing. I bet they never got quarantined. Probably never had a lockdown. So they haven't lived through the worst that we've lived through. We're much better than them. We've lived through all of this. We went to the grocery store once, and they were out of eggs and milk. See, I don't know what that's like in Florida. That's like anytime they predict snow in Georgia. It's going to snow. Well, we got to go buy eggs and milk. I don't know what we do with eggs and milk on snow days that we don't do with them the rest of the time, but we got to go buy them. And we all rush out and buy them. And bread. And only white bread. Colonial loaf bread. So you get here by having a people that just get softer and softer and softer. You know, my father grew up in a world where you had to work hard to survive. I grew up in a world where we had to wait till the end of the month to buy something because they got paid once a month as teachers. And that was the worst of it. My kids don't know that world. We've lived through some really tough economic times at my house. When I quit working with Jay Sekulow, I didn't have a job. God told me to quit. A lot of reasons. I didn't know him at the time. I'm just finding them out. We lived through some hard times, but my kids don't know that. Not to the level that my dad understood what he was going through. We're a soft country. We've forgotten God. And we've done it because we were taught in our schools that evolution is the answer. We came from monkeys. We evolved from monkeys. It was chance. Then we were told that also some of you are worth living and some of you aren't. And then we were told the 60s came and we had the whole sexual revolution because we had the pill was developed and suddenly there could be no consequences for promiscuous living and we lost all of our morals. At the same time, we were declaring God is dead. And then in the 70s, we had abortion on demand come along. So now we can take care of life. We can become God. We can decide whose life is worth living, all based on what a mother wants. And I get it that there are times when abortion is the only answer. I understand that. It's just not 1.5 million times a year in America. But if you're living a life that is looking for convenience, it is 1.5 million times a year. I saw a pop star the other day said, well, or a movie star and a pop star. I mean, evidently this is somebody gave him some talking points. If it weren't for my abortions, I would have never been able to do what I'm doing. So what do you mean, destroying our kids? Thanks. You killed yours and you're trying to kill mine. We became a culture comfortable with death. Of the innocent, the only people that should be left alone. Yeah. The ones who haven't done anything to anybody. Except that they're going to inconvenience a young mother. I would blame it on the fathers, but they're not allowed to have a voice. Maybe that is the blame. We allow this to happen and then go, wait a minute, this is part me. You can't just do this. You have to talk to me. We didn't have anybody with that courage. You know, and I hear all the time, well, you know, it's better this way than having them born unwanted. And I'm like, I talked to an adoption lawyer in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas. At the time, Wichita, Kansas was the only place in the country you could come on the day your baby was due and have it aborted in Wichita, Kansas by George Tiller. He's dead now. God rest his soul, because I'm sure it's tormented. I talked to an adoption lawyer who said to me, Joel, if I had a baby that was nothing but an arm and a head, I could find a good family for it. Amen. Since abortion has started in this country, it's impossible to adopt a baby in this country. We've made it harder to adopt and easier to abort instead of the other way around. You know, Wendy's, looking for a fast food alternative, Wendy's is giving money to adoption. They're publicly bragging about it. Yes.
Do we want to touch on what they're doing with the aborted babies after they're done keeping them out of the mother? No,
we're not talking about vaccines tonight.
Oh, okay. Because that's kind of important too.
No, it is.
Wendy's is really appreciative of all those aborted babies.
Well, no, Wendy's is working on adoption. They're going through the adoption, which, listen, I get it that all these companies have all kinds of evil components to them, but anytime somebody steps up and does something in a positive vein to say, we're going to start putting money in to help making adoptions happen, I'm willing to forgive some sins to have the righteousness of that moment carried forward. So I think that's important.
I just don't want to forget the history.
No, I'm with you 100%. I believe in the history. And I'm not saying only go to Wendy's. I'm just saying, hey, listen, I spend more time at McDonald's than I do at Wendy's. McDonald's isn't doing anything like this. Taco Bell's not. Burger King's not. And maybe because they don't have the conscience that needs to be cleared. But the bottom line is, we need to get back to a place where we have an appreciation for life, not as a church, because the church has it, but out there, out beyond these four walls. We've got to get this country back to a place where we appreciate the culture of life. Now, we're talked about the fact that we're willing to sacrifice our children before they're born. Now, with what's going on do you have that? I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but do you have that booklet again? Yeah. Now, with this whole transgender agenda, we're sacrificing our children after they're born now. We're like the pagans of old. It's not good enough that we're going to kill them before they're born. We're going to have to try to destroy them after they're born by telling them, you can be what you want to be. You don't have to, we don't know what you are. Take your time, make a decision. No, you can't buy any tobacco. No, you can't buy alcohol. Oh, but you can decide what sex you are, a concept you don't understand. You can decide if you're a boy or a girl. Listen, there are kids all over the place that every other day want to be something else. I wanted to be a professional football player. Guess how many days of professional football I played? Oh, you got it. Didn't make it past high school. Wasn't willing to work hard enough. Probably wasn't good enough either. But even if I had been, I wasn't willing to work hard enough. You can't just be anything you want to be, but we're afraid to tell our kids that. We've created Navigating the Transgender Landscape School Resource Guide with an organization I'm working with. I'm not here tonight talking about this, but I'm going to throw this shameless plug out anyway. This organization, we are distributing this to every local school superintendent in the country by hand. We're not mailing it to them.
Make sure they get it.
We're going to make sure they get it, because if you mail it to them, they may see it, they may not. Now, I understand not everybody's going to take it, and we're working with a lot of people to do that. This is a guide that tells school officials how to handle the transgender issues and how to treat every student with dignity. You shouldn't be allowing any bullying to go on. You shouldn't allow the fat kids to be bullied, the dumb kids to be bullied, the white kids to be bullied, the black kids to be bullied, the girls to be bullied, the girls who think they're boys to be bullied, and nobody. How hard is this message to get? We're having a hard time with it because there's some things that it's okay to bully people on. White male is one of them. But we've got to get to a place where we say no more. And this guide, it goes through the medical information that's out there, because these guys aren't getting accurate information from the other side. There are 210 footnotes in this 68-page guide. When the ACLU prints a book to school officials talking about how you have to affirm children who think they're the opposite sex, they have maybe 10 footnotes in it. You know why? There aren't any studies that support their side of the science. The people who believe in science are suspending science to tell us there are 182 genders. One of the lady who censors for Twitter believes she's a deer. A deer, D-E-E-R. Did I put too many E's in that? Okay. That's one of the gender options. Hey, if we're making crap up, why not? I've declared publicly that I'm a plastic jug. That's my new gender. I'm going to get it on my driver's license one day. No particular reason. It just came out of my mouth when we were talking about it. But why not? If everything is that fluid. And when we put these kids through these processes and affirm them, they end up sterile on the back end of this. So if they change their mind later, they can't have kids. But listen, that doesn't matter to the LGBTQ plus community, because they can't have kids either. Because in the beginning, God created him. Male and female created he them. If you believe there are 182 genders, the only way you can believe that is to not believe the Bible. That's what this battle's been about the whole time. Evolution. The Bible's not right. God didn't really create it. They couldn't go all the way. God didn't really create it. You can still believe in God. It's okay, because God could have come along anytime. He just kind of turned his back on it and let it happen. There was no God. But if you want to believe in God, that's fine. Abortion, we're just getting rid of the kids that we don't need. Parents, it's mother's right to choose. It's this between a mother and her doctor. We still didn't have the nerve to say it. Now we got the nerve to say it. There is no God, because if God created male and female and that's all he created, Jesus talked about it. For this reason, a man will leave his home and marry a woman. He didn't offer more options. You think they didn't have more options back in the days Jesus was alive? Some of the most perverse civilizations in the history of the world, you think they hadn't figured out homosexuality? He didn't deal with it because the Jewish culture didn't believe in it. He didn't have to deal with it. They had a solution for it back then. It was a pile of rocks. Of course, the Jewish, the Old Testament guy, I like this New Testament guy much better, I'll be honest with you. The Old Testament guy stoned a lot of people. I mean, and I'm not talking about Colorado stoning here. I'm talking about the serious stuff with rocks. Woman caught in adultery, let's throw some rocks at her. That'll solve her problem. You cheapen it, you cheapen life, you get to the place where life has no value because you're not special. And guess what you end up with? Human trafficking. If life is not special, why can't I take anybody I want and put them into a market and make money off them? You have to be twisted. Yeah. You can't be thinking, you can't be in the back of your mind going, oh, I remember Sunday school, I know there's a God and I know everybody's accountable and that's okay because I've got a good answer for this. I can answer this one. It's not like with abortion you can always argue, well, it was my health, or you've got other arguments, but with this one, you've got no arguments. Now let me give you some facts, because we're getting close to eating time, but I'm not nearly done. I'm just putting everybody on warning.
Take your time.
Thank you. When I first started looking at this, back in 2011, Ron and I were working at the Department of Education in Georgia. We were working for the state school superintendent, so we were basically in charge of education. And I started looking at this and going, we need to be teaching people in Georgia what's going on with human trafficking. And at that time, human trafficking worldwide, it's organized crime. Now, it's not like the Gambini family in New York with this one family controlling everything. It's organized crime because there are people intentionally getting together to do this, but it's not, as far as we know, it's not just one family, although at some point I think you can probably trace it back to one very dark, twisted person in Europe is my guess. I don't know that. I'm purely speculating, but I think that's what we'll find out at the end of the day when we see all things clearly. But at that time, human trafficking was a $32 billion a year business. $32 billion. It was the third most beneficial trafficking or organized criminal endeavor in the world, behind gun running and drugs. But with guns, you can really only sell them once. With drugs, you can only use them once. With these girls, you can use them 20 or 30 times a day, which is what happens. The average life expectancy of a sex-trafficked human being is 7 years. From the day they start till the day they're dead, not the day they're no longer in the business, till the day they're dead is 7 years. Lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of physical abuse, it's all sexual abuse, lots of sexually transmitted diseases, everything you can think of. The life expectancy is small. The average age that a person gets involved in trafficking as a victim is somewhere between 12 and 14. I have a friend who is a reporter for CNN. She's one of the people that broke some of the early stories on human trafficking. And CNN, by the way, is a great network for the human trafficking issue. They're junk for any kind of news, but they're really good on human trafficking. So when you see their stuff on human trafficking, you need to watch it. You can go on their website. They have a special site set up that talks about human trafficking. It's really good stuff. It's bizarre, but they really are leading the world on this. She said that when she first got involved in this, and this would have been back in the early 2000s, that when they would talk about, when you would order your child from your trafficker, you would talk in terms of this. They would say, well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for 6 or 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old? What are you looking for? What hair color are you looking for? What eye color are you looking for? Special nationality? What exact? You could order them. You could fly into Atlanta, Georgia from anywhere in the world for a weekend with the girl you special ordered. They would deliver her to your hotel room. She would be there when you got checked in. You'd go into your room, spend the weekend with her. They would come pick her back up and take her back out and work somewhere else. She told me in 2012, 13 maybe, Joel, when I first got involved, they used to order them like this. Now they order them like this. Everything devolves. The lack of respect for life devolves. Starts with eugenics, which led to the Holocaust. Without eugenics, without Margaret Sanger's teachings, Hitler doesn't get to the Holocaust as easily as he did. He used her teachings to get there. She was one of his heroes. This crazy woman that founded Planned Parenthood. They're still predominantly in black neighborhoods performing abortions for poor people. We've got to help the poor people. And we do. Listen, I firmly believe that America has a lot of issues, and I believe that most of our issues at this point are socioeconomic issues, which tend to fall predominantly on people of color more than on non-people of color or white people. And so it tends to look like our system is more racist than it actually is, because the way the system works falls harder on people of color, and no one's stepping up to fix it. Now, we'll step up from every now and then when something egregious enough happens, but for most of us as a culture, we're willing to live and get along. Except for the church. It's not our job to live and get along. So they're ordering children this way. Since 2011, in 2019, sex trafficking. Now, back in 2011, there was all kind of good work going on. There's all kinds of good work going on all over the world about sex trafficking right now. But since it began at $32 billion in 2019, we've really made a huge impact on this industry. It only generated $150 billion in 2019. In 8 years, we've managed to help grow their business 500%. My theory is we're pruning the branches. As what's happening is they're giving us the people we're finding to arrest because these are their weak links. They're cleaning house. Organized crime is basically saying, here, the police are looking for a lead, give them this one. Let them go wrap up this group because these people don't know what they're doing anyway. What happened is people are so depraved that they'll spend that kind of money to abuse people in this way and not think anything about it. But we can't keep playing these games. And that's out of Louisiana. When I went to speak about this, I had a PowerPoint about this. I was real proud of it. I thought it was a good PowerPoint. You were sick. What did you think, Ron? Ron says it was mediocre, so it was good. And Ron speak, that means very good. Right? Yeah, 2 thumbs up. Okay, there we go. And afterwards, everybody wanted to talk about human trafficking. And I started praying about it. And I've been dealing with this issue for about 15 years, just off and on, looking for different ways to get engaged. And the Lord just spoke to me and said, that is what I want you to dedicate the rest of your life to. Eradicating human trafficking. Not playing around the edges. And the eradication is going to come because we've been attacking this as a physical problem, and it's a spiritual problem. We all know that. I mean, I'm not telling you, you're not going, wow, this guy's really deep. Where did he come up with this? This isn't rocket science. It's not brain surgery. But it's a spiritual problem. And we've been attacking it by rescuing girls, by having the police go out and capture the traffickers. And those are all good things. I'm not belittling anything. But we haven't had a concerted effort to prayer. And so what I've done is I'm organizing an organization. We're calling it One Voice International. And the first phase of this work is to set up a group of intercessors who will pray. I'm looking for people to commit to pray for 15 minutes a day. I don't want more than that, because I don't think by yourself you can pray about this dark issue for more than about 15 minutes. Because listen, I haven't gotten to the dark part, and I'm not going to, because the whole point of what we're talking about tonight is that we need to have hope, because there's hope coming. And I believe we win in the end. I mean, I know we do. We've all read the back of the book. Jesus comes, devil goes to hell, lots of fire. The rest of us go and have a good time. And that's kind of a paraphrased legal version. I'm assured that I'm getting in, which may make me the only lawyer there. Now, so you think that's funny, but I'm thinking I'm much more valuable. My rate's going to $700, $800, $900 an hour in heaven, because I'm the only one you got. So see who gets the last laugh. But it takes 672 people praying one time a week for 15 minutes to cover a week in prayer. And so I'm looking to build 672 prayer warriors to intercede, to take, like, I've got a pastor who just took 6 to 6:15. His wife just took 6:15 to 6:30 in the morning. If you can't pray at a specific time, we still want you praying. We're not going to turn you away and go, no, you can't pray for what we're doing, because you won't do it our way. That's not what we're about. 672 people praying once a week, all year long. We cover this issue in prayer. At the same time, we're building an international prayer team. It's 35,040 15-minute segments in a year, not counting leap year. So this year would have had 24 hours more. I did the math once, but it's not sticking in my head right now. Praying around the clock, around the world, to end human trafficking. We're going after the root. There's a tree somewhere. And I didn't have time to get into all this. But, if you go back to the Garden of Eden, there were 2 trees in the garden. There was the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can eat of any tree in the garden except this one. And you know what the woman picked, right? And I'm not blaming it on the women, because frankly, we would have gotten there. It would have just taken us longer to find the tree without your help. That's it. I mean, listen, I know men, we would have made it to the tree. Okay? So you don't get blamed for that. But we chose the wrong tree. And everything about this comes out of the knowledge of good and evil. It comes out of the belief that there is no God, the belief that man is in charge, the belief that we can do anything we want because we're people, and might makes right. That's where this comes from. We're going to root that tree up through prayer and replace it with the tree of life, the tree that values human life. This says life is the most precious thing ever created in the history of the world. God created it and gave it to us. The most incredible thing. Now, in addition to that, another part of the prayer initiative is we're going to start, there are citadels, there are cities of authority all over the world where human trafficking happens. We're going to start in Jerusalem because Jerusalem's the spiritual center of the world. Spiritual capital, there's no debating that. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all look at Jerusalem as the central thing. Jesus ascended into heaven from Jerusalem. When he returns, he's coming back to Jerusalem. I know it's shocking, isn't it? There's something about Jerusalem. I've been there. It's actually not that impressive. It's a nice little city on a hill full of rocks with very little water around. You're kind of going, really, God, this is your idea of the best place you could do? I'm being facetious because it's an amazing place. You have to go at least one time in your life. It's an amazing place. We're going to put together a prayer team, and Ron and I are going to be going over sometime in March or April, as soon as Israel opens back up and lets Americans in, to meet with people on the ground who are going to help us organize a prayer team in Jerusalem to pray all year long from now on to eradicate human trafficking in Jerusalem and send it out into the world. Prayer walks. We're going to drive a stake in the ground at the TBN studios in Jerusalem. It looks out over the old city, looks out over the Dome of the Rock. That says we are eradicating human trafficking in Jerusalem in English and Hebrew, and leave that stake in the ground. We're declaring this is where it's starting. We've got a declaration that once a week we're going to have people go to all of the gates that surround us. There are 12 gates. Some of them don't still exist, but go to where the gates were. All 12 gates face out from Jerusalem into the four corners of the earth and declare Jerusalem free from human trafficking and the rest of the world free once Jerusalem is free. As the spiritual capital of the world, we're starting it there. Then we're going to cities like Thessaloniki, Greece, which is the main transport hub into and out of Europe for all traffic victims. We're going to Pattaya, Thailand, which is ground zero for international human trafficking. It all happens there. Moscow, London, New York, LA, Atlanta. I'm sure, don't feel bad, I'm sure Florida's going to have a city too. Probably Miami. All of these cities where there are strongholds for human trafficking, to start prayer movements in all of those cities, to not pray about anything else. Your grandma's not feeling well? I feel really sorry for you, but we're not praying for that. We're praying for one thing: to end human trafficking. We're praying to stop these girls and boys from becoming victims of a life-destroying movement. We're going to take it back. At the same time, we're working on creating a curriculum for kindergarten through 12th grade that is going to be in every year that a child's in school. This will be a public school curriculum. It's going to teach about human trafficking every grade, a week here, a week there, in every year. It's not a book that you take in the 8th grade or a class you take in the 10th grade. It's something that's going to fit into the curriculum, because guess what? If you've ever looked at your health standards for the state of Florida, I guarantee you in kindergarten there are some standards that deal with human trafficking. But they don't have anything to teach them. So the teacher probably mentions it, talks about it for a minute, moves on. We're going to create a curriculum they can use to do that. Use it in America. We're going to sell it here to help fund the ministry. We're going to sell it in Western Europe. We're going to translate it, sell it all over Western Europe, and then we're going to give it away in Africa. We're going to give it away in Central America and the places that can't afford it. And ultimately try to educate all of our children, because other than prayer, educating the most likely victims is the next best thing to stopping it. And at the same time, we're also beginning to work with the refugees in Greece coming out of the Middle East. A lot of these people are Christians. Did you know that? People are literally, during the height of the war in Syria, people were fleeing Syria. When they got to the border of Jordan, which is the next country over between Syria and Israel, they would stop at the border and they would tell the border control agents, "Hi, we're fleeing the wrath that's going on here, and we want to talk to a Christian missionary." And they would go, "Why?" And they would go, "Because if this is Islam, we're done." People all over the Middle East are getting saved in their dreams. Did you know that? Jesus is appearing to them in their dreams, telling them who he is, baptizing them in their dreams, and declaring them saved, and they're waking up Christians.
Praise God.
It's good news.
Yes.
Unless you're living in a Muslim refugee camp. And then guess what you get for your glorious salvation? A fatwa. A death sentence on your head. No food, no water, no clothes, no shelter. You can be raped, you can be stabbed, you can be beaten. There's at least 1,000 Christian refugee families in Greece right now living in Muslim camps where they're being treated like that, and the Greek government won't help. The European Union will not help. The United Nations will not help. There's organizations that are working there now. We're already working with them. And what we're going to do is we're going to be finding churches that have families that are willing to be sponsors and find Christian refugee families where both the mother and the father have become Christians beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'm not vetting them. There are people over there that are vetting them every day already because their lives depend on it. And we're going to find them sponsorships and get them asylum in the United States and bring Christian refugees to this country. How nice would that be to have a Syrian Christian refugee neighborhood? It'd be very different. Great cultural experience. I mean, Syrians, they've been around forever. The Syrians were killing the Jews way before Moses came along. And that's what you've been reading about your whole life. That's how we're starting it. We're also going to be doing some other things, but that's probably enough to keep us busy for a little while. Especially because we're going to concentrate on the prayer, because I firmly believe if we don't get the prayer right, this is never going to work. Because you understand, and this is what I would ask of you, all of you, even if you're not committing to pray for us for the 15 minutes, which is fine. I covet your prayers, because what I am doing is I'm painting a huge bullseye on my chest. Organized crime. I'm not worried about Satan. I kind of take the Smith Wigglesworth approach to that. You remember the story about, everybody know Smith Wigglesworth? Yeah. Remember the story? He felt a presence in his room late one night. He woke up, he lit a candle, he leaned down to the end of the bed, and there was Satan sitting at the end of the bed looking menacing. And he looks Satan dead in the eye and goes, "Oh, it's only you." Blows out the candle and goes back to bed. Now, I'm not saying I'm there, but I'm not worried about Satan. I'm worried about the Bulgarian trafficker who's making a couple of $1 million a year and is not happy about this organization that's eating into his profit. Because here's what I haven't told you. As we're praying about this, I've got a couple of people, one man in particular that I pray with virtually every week. He committed to pray with me for 15 minutes a week, and so I call him every week, and we get on the phone for about an hour and a half. And a powerful, powerful man of God. He's a guy I represented in Germany as a pastor 20 years ago. And one of the first nights we were praying, he said, "Joel, the Lord is showing me a 26-year-old man in São Paulo, Brazil, who was a trafficker. But as a young man, he had an experience with God, and he walked away from it. And as life came along, greed and sin got in the way, and he got in the middle of this. And God showed me that we're going to go find that young man and bring him out of trafficking." So we're not just going for the victims, we're going for the perpetrators.
That's right.
Yeah, it's great in here, but imagine how half the world's going to feel about that. You're doing what? You're helping these people. These people ought to be lined up against a wall and shot. And I believe that. I believe that would be justice. And my wife is going to be so proud to hear me say, "Ron, you have to vouch for me." This is a time when justice isn't going to be called for, it's going to be mercy. Amen. Because the perpetrators are trapped in sin as much as the people they're trapping who are not volunteering for the sin. I mean, these victims have no sin. That's right. there's no sin in the victims. They didn't choose this. They aren't voluntarily doing it. Even if they quit trying to get away, they're not volunteering. They have no sin. They're as innocent as the day they were born. And that's the other thing is I believe, God told me this, I'm no longer willing to accept that these people can't be brought back to a normal life and completely healed. And I don't even know Christians that are willing to say that. I'm no longer accepting that victims of sex trafficking can't be restored to normalcy without any of the scars of this sin left in their life and the emotion. And that's understanding that this is the most damaging thing you can do to a human being. Because there's something spiritual about sexual relations. That's why the Bible protected it. That's why the Bible said only inside of a marriage. Because God knew it was a spiritual moment. It was two flesh becoming one and joining together. And I'm not talking about the act. I'm talking about what happens in the spirit. The damage is huge, but I'm refusing to accept it. And so, because we're going after these perpetrators all over the world, I actually believe God showed us that there's going to be a revival amongst the perpetrators of trafficking. It's one of the ways we're going to bring it down. And we're going to use these insiders to show us how they move their money, how they hide their money, and how they run their businesses to help us work with police departments to bring them down. You take away the money, you take away the spiritual covering, and you train the children how to avoid it and how to look for it. And in the midst of all that, suddenly this whole thing just crumbles as if it never existed, and then you replace it with a respect for life. That's the plan. So I covet your prayers as a church. I'd love for every time you guys gather together to pray, to have it on a list somewhere to pray those prayers of protection for us and prayers of...
On that board right there.
I'm already on the board.
Been for about a year.
Amen, my brother. Thanks, Tom.
Why don't you give us your website?
I'm working on the website right now. Because of my day job, I'm careful not to get out too much information too broadly on my new day job. I need to feed my family while I get this thing up and running. I promised my daughter that we wouldn't go through that again. And I'm gonna keep that promise to my precious daughter. And not because she's precious, but because she's about 5'10" and she's mean. So I'm going to keep it. She is precious, but she's fierce. I pray for the man she marries every day because he's going to need it. And I'm happy with that. It's not disappointing. I would covet your prayers. And as our website will be onevoiceinternational.com, all spelled out. And you can get there with the number onevoiceinternational.com. It's not up yet. I don't even think we're holding the place right now, but that's what it will be, onevoiceinternational.com. And the idea is we're one voice for peace. We're one voice for justice. We're one voice for freedom. We're one voice for eradicating human trafficking. We're going to work with anybody that will work with us. I've got friends that founded the Human Trafficking Division of Scotland Yard. They're not even Christians, and they're willing to work with us because I don't care. What you believe about Jesus is your problem. I told you I wasn't an evangelist, okay? Now you know why. It's like, I don't care. You can go to hell if you want. But if you're willing to help me eradicate human trafficking, then all aboard. And so that's the commitment I'm making to you. We're going to roll this thing out sometime in the first quarter or towards the end of the first quarter. And I'll have a website up before we go to Jerusalem. And there'll be a place on there. But right now, if you're interested in becoming an intercessor, Ron can get you that information. And so Brother James can get it to Brother Ron. And so we can go ahead and get you on a list because we are compiling a list. We've got 100 or so people on the list right now and from around the country, but we're looking at them from around the world because ultimately I envision Asia and Australia as an 8-hour zone, Europe and Africa is an 8-hour zone, and the Americas is an 8-hour zone, and we're going to just cover it so as the world rotates, people are praying during the daylight hours of where they live. That's the plan. So.